So this morning's lesson is, what is worship? Anybody have any ideas? What is their impression of what worship is? Okay, daily life. Anybody else? Okay. Anybody else? Of course. Okay, submission, humility. So this morning's verse is John 4:24. I started off back in verse 19. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. The woman said, I know the Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. So how does that tie in with what is worship? In spirit and truth, right? So the Samaritans were worshiping where? On a mountain north of Israel, right? Why were they worshiping there? The Jews considered them pagans. Did they consider themselves pagans? Because they were worshiping the same God, right? They were following the same rituals. They were just not doing it in Jerusalem. Why were they not doing it in Jerusalem? They weren't welcomed. Philip? Oh. During one of the purges of Israel, when God handed them over to another nation, all the men were taken off as slaves, and their wives were given to the Syrians, Babylonians, people from that area, whichever name you called them, whichever empire it was. Took the wives of the slaves as their wives, and so the Samaritans are the half-breed offspring of the Jews and not the Iraqis, right? Babylon, Syria, same area. And so they basically were not considered Jews anymore. So you're right, they were not welcomed in Jerusalem. So a quick search of Mr. Google gave us the following definitions for worship. When used as a noun, the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration for adoration, thank you. I'm looking at that. That's not how this is spelled. That's what happens whenever you mix German, English, Saxon, and French. Put it in a blender. You look at words and goes, that's not the way it's spelled. Okay. Anyway, enough of my excuses. Adoration for a deity. So what do we mean by adoration? To adore. Anybody else have any? As it's used as a noun? So we've got synonyms there. Reverence, veneration, adoration, glorification, glory, exaltation. Okay, so when we use it as a verb, show reverence or adoration to a deity, honor with religious rites. Here it says the Mayans built jungle pyramids to worship their gods. Ours is pretty much the same thing, except, we don't sacrifice thousands of people at a time. So what do we think on this? Anybody have any other thoughts? Or anything that jumps out to you? They touch her hand. Give her an iPod with all of your own speeches on it. That's humble. Okay. Anybody else? So for this morning, I broke it up into two categories. So worship done right, and then not so much, right? Sort of way President Trump didn't quite follow British protocol during his meeting a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Turned his back on the Queen, walked in front of her, cut her off. Things you're not supposed to do. Left the British just completely beside themselves. Pretty funny. So we're going to start off with John. We already read that one, in Spirit and Truth. And we're going to Acts. We have Paul and Silas in prison. We have Exodus, when we're told about how to worship the Lord. First Chronicles, His love endures forever. And Job, who, after having over 90% of his family killed, still worshiped the Lord. We have Isaiah, Matthew, and 1 Samuel. So we're going to go ahead and go to Acts. So again, this is Paul and Silas in prison. After they had severely flogged them, they threw them in jail, ordering the jailer to guard them carefully. Receiving such an order, he put them into the inner prison and secured their feet in shackles. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the jail were shaken. And immediately all the doors were open, and everyone's chains came loose. When the jailer woke up and saw the doors of the prison standing open, he drew his sword and was going to kill himself, since he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul called out in a loud voice, "Don't harm yourself, because we are all here." The jailer called for lights, rushed in, and fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. He escorted them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" So how many knows what the custom was under Roman rule if you were in charge of a prisoner? You would be executed if they escaped. And generally not a quick execution. And if you're in this gentleman's position as the jailer over many prisoners, it wouldn't just be you that was executed. It would also be your family. Or if you're lucky, they might be sold off into slavery instead. Be sent to somewhere nice and OSHA compliant, like, I don't know, an asbestos mine. The Romans did run some of those. So what do you get out of how to worship from this passage? Okay, you should have had more coffee at breakfast, maybe? Okay, so they were severely beaten with rods. That's sort of an open interpretation. So we don't know if that meant, lead pipes, or if that meant switches from cattails, or what. But apparently it was considered a severe flogging, or beat down with sticks. So, severe distress, they're worshiping anyway. Anybody else get anything different from this? Sir, you think you had something?
Well, what you said, they were in dire situation. Another thing that jumped out, they weren't saying what was this. They were open for it too. They didn't allow them to go in, and they was right up front and excited about what they were doing.
Was this normal behavior for a prison? What did it say the other prisoners were doing? They were just listening to these guys. They're like, what is different about these guys? So it made quite the impression on the other prisoners. So much so that when everything occurred with the earthquake, all the doors opened, all the chains fell off. What did the other prisoners do? They just sat there trying to figure out what was going on. This was not normal behavior for a jail, right? You bring some people in, they get the snot beat out of them with sticks, and then they get shackled. They start praying and singing. All of a sudden, earthquake opens everything up. I would say it was probably more than the jailer and the other guards and even the prisoners that took note of this. Anything else jump out to us? Yes, ma'am. Well, up until the earthquake, anyway. That may have raised a heart rate or two. Okay, we're going to go to Exodus. So this is God talking to the Israelites. I'm going to send an angel before you to protect you on the way and bring you to the place I have prepared. Be attentive to him and listen to him. Do not defy him, because he will not forgive your acts of rebellion. For my name is in him. But if you will carefully obey him and do everything I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes. For my angel will go before you and bring you to the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and I will wipe them out. Do not bow and worship to their gods, and do not serve them. Do not imitate their practices. Instead, demolish them and smash their sacred pillars and places. Serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water. I will remove illness from you. No woman will miscarry or be childless in your land. I will give you the full number of your days. So what do we learn from worship here? Both positive and negative. What else? Anybody? Well, he gave quite a list of blessings, but he also gave quite a list of peoples and temples he wanted destroyed en route. What else did we see? So he referred to this pillar of fire as an angel, right? And apparently this angel was going to be talking to them, and they should probably listen to what he said, as if you could ignore a giant column of fire, right? Yeah, especially a talking one. There you go. Yes, ma'am. Right, so he is actually sending them to temples as well, right? Temples of false gods. What are they supposed to do when they get there? Join in? Supposed to demolish it, right? So they're just supposed to walk through these other kingdoms and destroy every place of worship they have. Does anything else jump out to you? We'll move on to Chronicles 16:34. I'm going to begin in verse 31. Let the heavens rejoice. Let the earth be glad. Let them say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Let the sea resound. Let all that is in it, let the fields be jubilant, and everything in them. Let the trees of the forest sing. Let them sing for joy before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. So what do we get from this about worship? It doesn't just involve humans. So we've got trees singing. We've got the sound of the sea. So the sea is singing. And the very heavens. So that would be the stars, moon, other planets. And scientists have recently found that indeed, whenever you turn a radio telescope towards the various stars, they do have a rhythmic emission that's coming from them. They are literally singing. What else do we have? How long are we supposed to be doing this? Forever. And I heard something over here. Until he comes to judge the earth. What else did we pull from this? Other than we have things that are singing that are not human. trees, sea, stars. The wind, yeah. How many have ever slept in a hammock under a tree just listening to the wind go through it? Okay, that's probably safer in other states than it is in Arizona because you can wake up with a third-degree burn. We got a little bit of sunlight here. Anything else? Okay, let's go ahead and go to Job. Again, I think probably one of the greatest examples of a godly man. He just caught a whole lot of grief, even though he was doing everything right. So understand when hard times come to us, it may not be us that needs to learn the lesson. It may be others through us. Was Job doing anything wrong? No, quite the contrary, right? But he served as an example not only for everybody throughout the regions, but even until this day. And this is what, 4,000 years later? Somewhere in there? Cody, you got a better number for that? How long ago was Job? So 3,000 to 4,000? So pre-Moses. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin in verse 18. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the four corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. At this Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground and worshipped and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. So what do we take away from that? Nine people out of one family, yeah. So everybody understands what she's referring to, right? Idaho, was it Idaho or Ohio? Where was the tornadoes at? Missouri. So there saw some videos on YouTube and Michelle's Facebook where they were showing where the tornadoes went through. Amazingly enough, only 2 or 3 people were injured in those tornadoes. But oh, that was Iowa? But you saw cars stacked on top of each other 5 deep, like a tsunami had come through or something. I'd never seen behavior like that from a tornado. Vertically stacking cars. Normally they just send your car to the next state. It doesn't vertically stack them. It's really odd. And then the duck boat is basically a 2-ton 6x6 vehicle from World War II that they had fixed pontoons all the way around the truck so that it would float, so they could use it in amphibious assaults, both in Europe, Italy, then invasion on D-Day, and then in many of the Marine amphibious and Army amphibious assaults throughout the Pacific Rim in World War II. So it's a really heavy truck, but it's designed, they made it float by permanently welding pontoons to it, and they just called it the Duck. And normally they're almost impossible to sink, though this one happened earlier in the week, and then we had another one that sank 3 years ago. Both cases, they got flipped over by waves. It didn't appear to be a mechanical problem, but even when flipped over, it should have floated. It should have never sank by design, so I'm not sure they're trying to figure out what happened. But it was pretty bad. 17 people dead out of like 25 or something. Yeah, 9 in one family, yeah. So, pretty trying time. And as you said, Job has really set a high standard for us here. What else did we take away from this one? Excuse me. Okay, so how many have ever seen a small birthday candle? How bright is it if we take it outside right now in the Arizona sun? Well, first of all, it'd probably melt, but how bright is that candle in daylight? Not very. What about when we're having a birthday party and we turn all the lights off as we light the candles? How bright is it then? Enough that we can see everybody's faces, right? So what purposes does darkness serve? So in darkness, all eyes turn to the light, right? What about in daylight or good times? How many people show up for church when it's a beautiful day and they can go fishing? Or go to the racetrack if you're anywhere near Indianapolis or the Southeast. Different type of cars, but still racing, right? What was church attendance like after 9/11? For those old enough after the attack on Pearl Harbor? So does darkness serve a purpose? I'll leave you with that. The ones that survived, yes. So in Isaiah, I didn't say that. So ignore where it says chapter 60, verse 8. That's not the proper place. So Isaiah 1:13, we'll start in verse 10. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Listen to the instruction of our God, you people of Gomorrah. What do we know Sodom and Gomorrah for? Louder? Lack of hospitality. What else? Gross sin. Sexual misconduct. It was okay to get a crowd of a couple hundred people with the intent of publicly gang raping 2 men that had entered the city, right? And they did this without hiding their faces even. no shame whatsoever. So whenever you open the letter and it's addressed to the various tribes of Israel, and you start off with, you Sodomites, you Gomorrans, that's not necessarily a kind opening. Verse 11, the multitude of your sacrifices, what are they to me, says the Lord? I have more than enough burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fattened animals. I have no pleasure in the blood of bulls and lambs and goats. When you come to appear before me, who has asked this of you, this trampling of my courts? Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. New moon, Sabbath, and convocations. I cannot bear your worthless assemblies. Your new moon feasts and your appointed festivals I hate with all my being. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. Even when you offer many prayers, I am not listening. Your hands are full of blood. So here the Israelites are actually performing what has been commanded of them by God with these sacrifices, but God says the sacrifices aren't any good. Why? For those who aren't following, we've transitioned from doing it right to not doing it right. They're meaningless. Why? I'm sorry, I can hear you just well enough to tell that you're talking, but not what you said. If you could speak up. Well, we can discuss it. This is a lesson, not a sermon. Yeah, they're all worthless, but why are they worthless? They were commanded to do them, and they're doing them. Okay.
They're going through motions, but their daily life is total opposite direction. So since they choose to live their life in a very ungodly way, when they try to stop and show a perceived godliness by doing these sacrifices, God says it's going to come. I don't want it. And he doesn't even want them to do it because of the life that they're living.
Excuse me. So if you have a enemy that wants to put some good stuff down about you in the newspaper, would you generally accept that? If it's somebody that you know is out to get you. Why? It's not sincere. What else? Right. If you've done something good and they're trying to highlight it, either they're trying to ride your coattails or they're setting you up or both. And so whenever they're making these sacrifices and observing as commanded by God, these different festivals, the new moon festival, harvest festival, first fruits, and just general Sabbaths, which encompasses all of those. The Sabbath is, everybody understands that Sabbath is not just Saturday, right? It's any time God has specified a festival or a period of worship. Those are all considered Sabbaths. Believe it or not, there's a lot of confusion about that. People think it's Saturday only. What is the very last sentence there in verse 15? I'm not listening to you, and your hands are covered in blood. He could be meaning that literally, and he could be meaning it spiritually. As with humanity, it could probably be both. Let's go to Matthew 23. We're going to start in verse 25. Woe to you, teachers of the laws and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the laws and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as religious, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! Oh, we got a rhythm going here. You build tombs for the prophets and desecrate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of prophets. So you testify against yourself that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then, complete what your ancestors started. You snakes, you brood of vipers. How will you escape being condemned to hell? So, a generally uplifting letter. So what does it say about worship? What do we need to take away from this so that we don't end up with them? Okay. Okay. So who knows what a facade is? How many have ever driven down the street and seen a brick or stone home? Is it really a brick or stone home? Usually not, right? Usually it's just one layer of bricks or stone on the outside. It's not truly a brick or stone home. It's a brick or stone facade. Now around here, you got a lot of brick homes that the bricks really are the structural integrity of the building. They are true brick homes. Of course, the bricks are like this, not like that, size of a chocolate bar. So what should we take away with this? Fix yourself first. Yeah. Be bored in your own eye versus expecting your brothers, right? We talked about cleaning the outside of the bowl or cup. If you do that, what's the inside going to look like? Pretty quickly, right? You're going to have leftover debris of food and soup, molds, bugs, and everything pretty nasty. So, clean the heart first, and it will lead to cleaning of everything else.
But when you're talking about worship, what goes on inside this building is truly worship. I'm not trying to take anything away. But it doesn't continue. The worship is every day. It's a full time, every time, 24/7, 365.
Absolutely.
Worship is a continuing thing. It's not something you go do. It's something you do.
Absolutely. And so whenever we gather together, it's not just to worship, it's also to help each other and strengthen each other for the coming week. Sorry. That was not intended. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 13. We'll do verses 5 through 11. Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, close enough, east of Beth Aven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves and thickets among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. So why would you hide in those locations if the enemy has chariots? Chariots don't work so well through large boulders, right? Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgad, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilead. And Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offerings. Just as he finished making the offerings, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Saul replied, "When I saw the men were scattering, and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash." So why did he do this? He's trying to play it off like he was trying to do it to save the army. Who was he trying to save? Yeah, when he saw his army scattering and how badly outnumbered he was, if you go earlier in the chapter, you'll see he only had about 3,000 to 4,000 personnel. He asked for more. Yeah, some came, some didn't. So he was worried about being defeated and all of Israel being overrun by the Philistines, right? So he worshipped out of fear. Now, we sometimes sing a song, Amazing Grace, where it talks about fear getting you into the right place to start worshiping God, but then knowledge of God removes the fear, right? Should we fear God? Absolutely. Should we worship him only because of fear? No. That's what we need to take away from this one. Can you do the right thing out of fear, or what seems to be the right thing? Was he authorized to be the priest? You know, God separated the priest from the king, right? Two different positions. So in summary, what do we take away from this as examples that we should follow or emulate for worshiping correctly? What is worship? It's not just 1 or 2 days a week. It's the overall attitude and a desire for a relationship. The whole armor, there you go. What about what we shouldn't do? Do things that seem right, but if you actually take a little bit of time to study them, you realize that is not our role. We should not be doing that. So just as Job, Paul and Silas all experienced personally, there is a war going on. Not just for your souls, but any of the souls that you might influence. If they're dark days, continue to shine. Where do all eyes go in the darkness? To that birthday candle, right? To the light. Be the light. So thank you. We'll have an intermission for, 10 minutes or so? And remember, we can do all things through God who strengthens us.